You're listening to Project Management Paradise, the ultimate project management podcast.
Hello again and welcome to Project Management Paradise. Johnny Byrne here, and this podcast delivers real project management insights from experts around the world. Our proud sponsor today is Cora Systems. Cora Systems is a leading enterprise portfolio, program and project management solution provider. If you want to find out more about Cora solutions, which are live in 42 countries around the world, visit corasystems.com, where you can request a free demo and discover firsthand how Cora helps its clients gain control, governance and insight into their project portfolios. In this week's interview, I speak with Alison Foster about how software tools can benefit project management. Hello, Alison, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Hi. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you very much for taking the time to do our interview.
No problem.
For those who may not have heard of you, Alison, can you give us a little bit of a background in terms of your project management experience?
Well, I actually started off as a mental health nurse and trained in England and worked there in acute wards and forensic for a few years, and started to get involved in improvement projects that were service improvement projects. And from there, as I progressed, began to manage projects that were at a national level with the Department of Health. So for about the last 15 years or so, I've been managing and delivering pretty big service improvement projects and being a project manager.
And in terms of size, they're pretty big projects, I guess.
Yeah, so they can be. I mean, I've worked on national projects that have 25 sites. So an example would be when I had a role in trying to improve the waiting times for people trying to access drug treatment services. And I had 26 sites across the country that were trying to different ways of reducing the waiting times for people trying to get access to drug treatment, for example.
And in terms of numbers of people, big teams?
They varied. The teams varied in terms of numbers, so it would depend. So there would be small charity teams trying to do it in rural areas, and there would be large teams, we'll say, of 20, 30 people. That's large in a team within cities such as Birmingham, Manchester, London.
And in terms of multi-site management then of projects, can you give us a little bit of insight into, your advice on how people should do that?
Big thing is regular communication with all the sites and with all the sites together. So bringing people together as much as possible, even though their distance might be an issue. If you bring them together on a call and have a regular rhythm in terms of delivering the project. So even if you don't have much to say or not have much to update on, if you have a regular contact point on a fortnightly, monthly basis that keeps everybody in tune and with the project, that's always been really helpful, and to not sort of let that drop.
And with all the technology, I mean, we're on Skype at the moment, and there's GoToMeeting and various teleconferencing solutions. In your experience, do you find that productivity or communication, effectiveness of projects, etc., delivery just happens better when people meet?
It definitely. There are things that happen when people meet, so ideas happen, they start forming out of a conversation when you actually meet together in person. But if you're on a phone or webinar and you've got to keep to an agenda, people pretty much stick to that, and they're more concerned about time than they are when they actually meet face to face. So you can get a lot of things done, stick to a plan when you speak over the phone or on a webinar, but actually a lot of the ideas, relationship forming, things that actually help a project to move quite quickly happens when you meet face-to-face, in my opinion.
And in your experience then, are there 2 or 3 things that come to mind that always happen for a successful project?
Yeah, I think where the leader of the project or project sponsor appreciates that, yes, there's processes and ways of delivering it, and you can take whatever process off the shelf you that you're comfortable with, but the people who have to deliver that are very different, and understanding the team. So understanding the different individuals and making time to understand the team and communicate and build relationships is, to me, very important. So I think where you build trust, you build communication channels that are much more quick, fast, effective. You'll pick up the phone rather than sending emails when you know the people within the team. And if you know what they're like, their strengths are, and where perhaps their weaknesses are, and you have that kind of intelligence within the team, the project works much more effectively, in my opinion. So thinking about that organisational development, culture, leadership piece alongside the project management is essential.
You have team leads then on every site, and they obviously have a role then to manage that, and then they report directly to you, or how does that work out?
Again, I've worked in a number of projects, and each one is very different and depends on a number of factors. So it depends on the person leading it and the team that you've got as to what the communications are like. So you set the ground rules. It might be the environment or the organisation. So I've been in organisations where they've got very detailed processes. They've had teams that are long established, and there's not a lot of turnover. So they've got strong systems and processes, corporate knowledge that you work with, and things are done to a big degree of detail. And then you've got organisations that seem to have a lot of turnover, different people coming and going, and so there's a bit more flexibility around how projects are delivered. So it really, I think it depends on the individuals leading and who you've got in the team, and also the organisation. I don't think it feels the same in everywhere you go. So
I guess in your role then you've got to be pretty flexible and mindful of which particular team you're talking to at any particular time, their background, their culture, etc., and then I guess almost adopt the conversation accordingly.
Yeah, I guess for me, if I have that flexibility and I have that awareness, then I have more opportunities in terms of where I work. You could be a particular kind of project manager or leader that has a particular style, works exactly to Prince 2 or managing successful projects, and that's what you do. And an organisation or somebody looking for that would find you very valuable. But I think certainly in the NHS and in healthcare, you've got to be much more flexible and adaptable if you want more opportunities out there.
What else comes to mind then in terms of a successful project? I'm sure there are quite large ones you've worked on, considering the sheer scale and size of the NHS.
Another one that comes to mind is something where you have to say out loud, or people in the team say out loud, that it's okay to make mistakes, or it's okay that the plan, something doesn't go according to plan, that you create an environment that means that you have a tolerance for things that are not going quite right, and then you have an openness that means you can talk about it and that you learn from that. So there's a learning culture that from that project. Where that is developed and is evident and visible, you get people who are much more, don't hide things, aren't afraid to say things, and therefore things are kept on top of much more quickly. So that I think that's very, very important, is allowing that learning to happen and you have to repeatedly say it. You can't assume that this week everybody knows I've said that this week, and next week they'll remember that, because actually when something goes wrong, it needs to be said regularly. So that would be very important to me.
Yeah, I mean, the more people we talk to on the podcast, transparency comes up, and just the sheer importance of people, irrespective of the particular methodology that's been followed. And I guess it's coming through in this interview as well, how important that is. In terms of project management itself then, you've over 20 years experience. How do you believe it has changed over those 20 years?
I think certainly in the NHS where I've worked, or in healthcare, I see much more flexibility, which has a positiveness and also downsides to it. So flexibility in approach. So a lot of what we're told in the NHS in terms of managing change and successful change is that it doesn't really matter what approach you use, so long as you pick one and stick to it. So, if you're going to use Prince 2 to follow it, or some other improvement or project management methodology, just pick it and stick to it. So what's happened is that people are developing and shaping their own methodologies within organisations, and then they're delivering training programs within organisations that are in-house. So it feels like there's about 1,000 versions of how a project should be run, loosely based on Prince 2 and managing successful programs or that kind of thing in the NHS. And that kind of good on the one hand, because it's adapting and being more resilient, and everybody in the organisation will get trained on it. But actually, sometimes people can go adrift of some of the core principles that are essential to delivering a project.
Yeah, and I guess it runs the risk internally of it being, or does it, possibly a bit too loose and drifts too far from a proven methodology, or is that fair?
Yeah, you'll get people or leaders in organisations that say, listen, you don't need to complete all of these steps in a project. We want light touch. We want a light touch project. And that engages some people in delivering the project because then they don't feel like they have to complete pages and pages of project management documentation. But then actually quite a lot of that is needed. And when you go into the project, so you're managing change or change control, that's something that gets dropped quite quickly in the projects that I've managed is a change control process. Then you'll find that actually things go awry down, as the project progresses and you can't track back as to where that's happened. So it's just small, it feels like small things. So if you talk to somebody particularly who hasn't had formal project management training about the essential reason for these essential parts of project management, they'll take a decision to say, you know what, I just want people to write a plan and write a highlight report and tell me the risks. Those are the three things that I want them to do, and all the rest we'll just manage as we go. And it gets complicated when that happens.
So it's a little bit too loose then?
I think it's too loose. What are you going to do to put in place the things that you're dropping so that doesn't get discussed? So fine, if you think you can manage change control by having discussions or meetings or conversations, if that's how you're going to do it, then we need to be clear about that. We need to be clear about how those areas are going to be picked up. And often they're not. It's a way of trying to reduce what they see as administration and additional tasks that are not needed to deliver a project.
And I guess then to look at successful projects, you've less data to actually go through to decide, well, actually, it was a great project or a successful project because you have data to go through. And if you don't have it, then you can't, I guess, rinse and repeat or something that worked well if people aren't recording. I'm not suggesting they go to the nth degree in terms of keeping every single piece of data that they manage to do or record every single activity. I guess, too, when things go wrong, it could be difficult to assess where exactly went wrong if it's too loose.
That's right, and I guess we've got a big issue in the NHS of having to deliver huge efficiencies over the next few years, and 70% of our costs are workforce, and yet we don't track, particularly in change management projects. There's constant change in the NHS. We don't track or capture resource management quite often, where and people will say, well, you won't get people to complete timesheets, so let's not do that, or track their time according to delivering the project. That's not going to happen. So people don't tend to do that, and it's a wasted opportunity. It's a wasted opportunity, given that that's where a huge amount of efficiencies and learning can be captured through that kind of clarity around resource management.
And is that where the big change is going to come within the NHS, is to do more of that recording, I guess?
Yes, so we're working with a number of organisations now who are looking to use technology. There's a big drive to use technology to support things to make activity more efficient. And this is just one area of multiple. So project management, using technology, online technology, to be more efficient in terms of workforce, but also to give that visibility of what the workforce are doing and to track that. Now, we're at really early stages. IT departments and teams within the NHS seem to have been doing this for quite a while, but other teams that work in the NHS, this is completely new to them.
And I suppose software tools then is one of the big solutions?
Yeah, so software is going to help and has helped a lot of organisations, certainly that I've worked with. And we've got now people like the Department of Health who have got a huge programme of driving efficiencies through technology, who are now looking at online project management software tools to support them to do that. And they're looking at places like HSE, who have been doing that for the last couple of years, using an online project management tool to deliver their reform programme. So there's a bit of an information exchange there, but that's definitely a direction of travel that's picking up pace over in the NHS.
And it's working well for the HSE?
It's working very well for the HSE, and they brought it in to do one thing, and I think they've used it now for about 4 or 5 other different things to deliver efficiencies. I think one example is making improvements in maternity care, so to help track and monitor quality improvements in maternity care that previously would have been done in a very time-consuming way is being done really efficiently now. So there's some real sort of patient quality impact that's being done and time and efficiency being demonstrated through using software. So it's exciting.
And it must make governance a lot easier.
Yeah. So one of the questions I got asked recently was, what do the chief executives, if you were to ask them, what would be their headache? What would keep them awake at night? And my response would be that there wouldn't be any surprises. That they have that grip and governance, that they know now what's delivering, what isn't delivering. And there isn't a surprise 3 months down the line when you've developed brought together all the data to produce a report for the board. That's really an issue now for chief executives, for example.
So the big challenge then, of course, is convincing the people working on the projects to enter the data, quite simply.
Yeah, you can't underestimate the behaviour change required to do what we're asking people to do. So when I work with people, I'll say, well, you can bring in an online tool and that will help you, but you can't just say, here it is, and give it to people and just expect that, because you've given them an instruction manual and you've made it really easy for them to be able to use the tool, that they'll go away and use it. Because they've been doing things a particular way for a long, long time, that actually you've got to invest a lot of time in helping people to change their behaviour. Some of the ways that people have been delivering projects is habit, and it's getting people to come out of a habit and try something different. And that's where a lot of the effort goes into. Yes, benefits come out when you are successful, but that time and investment into the behaviour change element is massively important for the success of this kind of implementation for PMO software.
And are timesheets the big challenge?
Yeah, timesheets have been I personally implemented a time recording system, and where you have none at all, it's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge in terms of defining what you call things, how you call it, and then to actually get people to fill out timesheets at the end of a week or even as they go is massively difficult. But that's a direction of travel. More and more organisations in the NHS are now moving to timesheets and try to record time, which what happens is we get sites who are using that technology or using timesheets or time recording, and they're surfacing areas for improvements and efficiencies, and that's what sells the story. I can go in and say it will be great, but actually when they get another organisation like a hospital coming in, another trust coming in and saying, we've implemented timesheets, and this is what we found over the 6 months, and so we were able to identify some areas to improve, and it saved us X amount of money, that kind of experience.
So if I'm in the NHS then and I say, look, I've been here for X number of years and managed projects quite successfully and we've never recorded time, how do you turn that a culture or a habit around?
Well, there's a big challenge ahead in terms of delivering. Never before has the NHS had to deliver the efficiencies that it has now to deliver over the next 2 to 5 years in particular. So there's some investment now into technology taking place, into new ways of working taking place, because in real terms, over the next sort of 2 to 5 years, the amount of resource will be reducing. So how are you going to get that out of the system? How are you going to be more efficient if you don't have that visibility? So it may have worked in the past because there have been different pressures in the past, but things are changing going forward.
Yeah, but that's at the high level, I guess. That's the goal or the benefit for, those in charge at the top level. But, on a day-to-day basis, if I'm thinking what's in it for me in terms of why should I record my time? I've never done it before and things went okay. I guess how do you deal with that challenge? Is it culture change management? Is it training? Is it, well, if you don't do it, there's going to be consequences? Or how is it actually managed on a day-to-day basis or encouraged?
So we tend to get people who've done it before to share their experience about why it was helpful. So for team managers, it was helpful to understand what they thought their staff were doing with their time and to facilitate discussions. So having visibility, that data, as you said earlier, having that data in front of you to then facilitate discussions about what you may or may not do differently. So that's kind of having that visibility. And I think if people are project managers and are in particular, they're much more open to having data to drive improvement. And that's the angle we come from. So we try and get them to talk to or listen to people who've done it before and to share the benefits that they've had in terms of recording their time. So most people will say there's a few weeks of pain of changing what they're doing, but when they see and have fed back to them the data from the time recording and see and compare it to their colleagues and what they're doing, it's facilitating and changing the conversation about how they might do things differently and where there are opportunities to make improvements for themselves and for the teams.
And other, I'm sure, benefits then with the software, governance is one we discussed. What else comes out from the use of software effectively in projects in the NHS?
So the governance issue is really important just in terms of grip, but also in terms of savings when you have visibility a lot sooner. So there's a cycle of reporting, which I'm sure is the same in a lot of organisations, that you either have a monthly board report or that happens. That reporting process means that quite often there's a lag of what you're reporting on. You might be reporting on activity that's happened 2 months ago to a board. And what this is doing is giving much more real-time reporting, which means that if a project is going adrift, you're catching it potentially 2 or 3 months before you would have ordinarily caught it. And that is particularly for large-scale projects, multi-million-pound projects, redevelopment projects that we work on. That is delivering a lot of efficiencies. I'm sure it has to, with just the sheer amount of information. I have some insight with the HSE, and it's just huge. The scale of the projects, the efficiency pressures, as you mentioned, and also the amount of multi-site teams, the amount of data that has to be collected, and the only way it's going to work, from what I see, is just, I'm a bit of a techie myself. I've just some of the software tools that I use for the day-to-day running of the podcast and working with clients and businesses and things like that. That the tools, there's a bit of pain in the learning because it's new. I know I've got so far without it, but actually when you start to see the efficiency benefits, it's significant. So it's just got to work, for these big scale projects. It's the only way to go. I mean, when you consider the size of the NHS, although there feels like there's multiple organisations doing things in their own way within that, if you were leading and heading the NHS and saw the opportunity by using something that is consistent, that can give you that visibility and deliver efficiencies, you definitely want to millions. You could save millions, if it was used, and in that one organisation, if you class the NHS as one organisation, which it is. Well, look, Alison, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. If people want to find out more about the work that you do, where should they go? Well, you could go to my website at qualitypoint.uk, and that's where you'll find me. Great. Well, look, we'll include that in the show notes. And again, thanks very much for being our guest on the Project Management Paradise podcast. Thank you. And that was our recent interview with Alison Foster. You will find a link to Alison's website and LinkedIn profile in the show notes at projectmanagementparadise.com/9. We'd also love an honest review on iTunes and welcome feedback about this podcast at the same link. That's projectmanagementparadise.com/9. Our proud sponsor today is Cora Systems. Cora Systems is a leading enterprise portfolio, program and project management solution provider. If you want to find out more about Cora Solutions, which are live in 42 countries around the world, visit corasystems.com, where you can request a free demo and discover firsthand how Cora helps its clients gain control, governance and insight into their project portfolios. Thanks again for listening, and be sure to tune in again next week for another great guest.
Thanks for listening to the Project Management Paradise podcast at projectmanagementparadise.com.